The storm rolled over mountains like a restless beast, its voice rumbling through the valleys, shaking pine branches until they bent under the weight of wind and water. Rain lashed against the rocky slopes, turning dust into mud and carving rivulets that streamed toward the ravine far below. A lone figure moved carefully along the trail, shoulders hunched against the gale, boots slipping on wet stone. The ranger had been on patrol since dawn, but the weather had swallowed all sense of time. His breath came ragged, not just from a climb, but from the weight of thoughts that never left him, thoughts that gnawed at his spirit even more than the storm battered his body. He had lived with guilt for years, carrying it like an invisible pack strapped tight across his chest. In the silence of the forest, memories crept in uninvited. Screams shattered branches, the crushing sound of rockfall. He remembered comrades buried under earth and stone, the helplessness of standing too far to save them. People told him it wasn't his fault, that nature was merciless, but he had never believed them. He had been the one leading that patrol. He had been the one in command. Their absence followed him like shadows that stretched longer every year. He pulled his coat tighter, pausing to glance at the distant ridge where the path curved toward the ranger station. Through sheets of rain, he thought he saw a figure waiting near the corral. The storm blurred details, but the man's posture was unmistakable, shoulders squared, legs planted firm, arms at ease yet ready. A soldier's stance. The ranger quickened his pace, curiosity tugging at him despite exhaustion. The man by the corral was older, perhaps in his late 60s, face lined not just by years, but by battles fought within and without. His hair was steel gray, his hands scarred, yet his eyes remained calm, steady as a mountain lake. He nodded in greeting when the ranger approached, rain dripping from the brim of his battered hat. "You must be the ranger everyone talks about," the older man said, his voice deep but carrying warmth beneath its gravel. The ranger studied him with suspicion. Strangers rarely appeared here unannounced, especially in weather like this. "And you must be lost," he replied, tone sharper than intended. "Not lost," the man answered, almost amused. "Retired. Looking for quiet and maybe a purpose. Name's Carter. Most just call me the veteran." The ranger gave a curt nod. He had no energy for conversation, yet something in the man's presence unsettled him. It wasn't threat. Carter radiated steadiness, not danger, but recognition, as though the older man could read the burdens he worked so hard to conceal. Before the ranger could excuse himself, a sound cut through the storm, a heavy, guttural snort followed by the thud of hooves against damp ground. He turned, eyes widening. The horse that emerged from shadows of the barn seemed unreal, a creature pulled from half-remembered myths. Towering nearly twice the height of any ordinary steed, with muscles that rippled beneath a coat dark as storm clouds, the animal moved with both power and caution. Its mane whipped like a banner, its eyes sharp and wary. The ranger had heard rumors of a horse left behind after its owner's death, but he had dismissed them as exaggerations. Seeing it now alive and immense made his pulse quicken. Locals had avoided the animal, whispering of its temper, its untamed force. Even from a distance, its presence commanded awe and a sliver of fear. The ranger instinctively stepped back, hand brushing the hilt of his knife out of habit more than intent. Carter, however, stood unmoving, gaze fixed on the horse, as though greeting an old comrade. "Magnificent, isn't he?" Carter said, voice low, almost reverent. "Dangerous," the ranger countered. "Only because no one's given him a reason to trust," Carter replied. He took a careful step closer to the giant, extending his hand. The horse flared its nostrils, ears flicking back, hooves shifting restlessly. Rain ran in rivulets down its flank, muscles tense as a bowstring. The ranger shook his head. "That thing will crush you. Best to leave it be." Carter glanced at him, eyes narrowing with quiet conviction. "You see danger. I see myself, once wild, once feared. Broken things recognize each other. Sometimes all they need is patience." The words struck the ranger harder than expected. He looked away, jaw tightening, unwilling to let the stranger's observation cut deeper. Still, he couldn't ignore the truth buried in it. The horse let out a sharp breath, a sound that seemed halfway between defiance and exhaustion. Carter didn't flinch. Instead, he lowered his hand, not retreating but offering space. The ranger watched, conflicted, rain soaking through his coat as silence stretched between man and beast. Finally, Carter turned back. "Help me with him. Together, we might earn his trust. Alone, neither of us stands a chance." The ranger's first instinct was refusal. He wanted no part of this madness, no part of risking life or limb over an animal that clearly wanted no company. Yet something in Carter's steady gaze, something in the quiet strength of the horse's presence, stirred a restlessness inside him. He thought of the shadows he carried, the memories that never let go. Maybe, just maybe, there was truth in Carter's words, broken things recognizing each other. "You're asking me to waste my time," he said flatly. "I'm asking you not to waste your life," Carter replied, voice calm, yet unyielding. The ranger's lips pressed into a hard line. He hated being seen through, hated being pushed, yet he found himself nodding despite resistance. Perhaps it was defiance, perhaps curiosity, or perhaps something deeper he wasn't ready to name. As the storm began to ease, thunder rolling farther away, the three figures stood in a tense triangle. The weary ranger burdened by guilt, the veteran who carried his own scars yet still believed in redemption, and the giant horse whose very existence seemed like a challenge to both. The ranger met Carter's eyes, then glanced at the horse. He didn't speak, but his silence was an agreement. Somewhere inside, he knew this was the first step on a path he hadn't planned to take, a path that might drag him back into pain, but perhaps also toward something he had long thought lost. The horse tossed its head, rain spraying like diamonds in the fading stormlight. The ranger felt a shiver, not of fear, but of anticipation. For the first time in years, the weight on his chest shifted, just slightly, as though the storm outside had stirred the one within. And though he didn't yet understand why, he knew he would return tomorrow. The dawn crept slowly across the valley, a fragile light spilling over the wet ground as mist curled like smoke among the pines. The ranger stood at the edge of the corral, boots planted firmly in mud that squelched with each shift of his weight. Before him, the massive horse loomed, its breath rising in steady bursts, each exhale white in the cool air. The creature's sheer size was enough to unsettle even the bravest man, but it was the eyes, dark, intelligent, unyielding, that rooted the ranger to the spot. They seemed to study him with as much suspicion as he gave them, and neither moved for a long, tense moment. Carter leaned against the fence, his hat pulled low, his voice calm as water on still stone. "He's waiting for you to decide," the veteran said. "You can keep standing there, or you can try to meet him where he is." The ranger's jaw tightened. His instincts screamed caution, but something deeper urged him forward. He took a step, slow and measured, rope in hand. The horse flared its nostrils, ears flicking back, then sidestepped in a quick, powerful motion that left the ranger gripping the rope uselessly in midair. Frustration surged. "He doesn't want me," the ranger muttered, pulling the rope back. "He'll never trust me." Carter pushed himself from a fence, his gaze steady. "It's not about wanting. It's about waiting. Trust isn't given in a day. You of all people should know that." The words cut, though Carter's tone was not harsh. The ranger swallowed his retort, stepping back, watching the horse paw the ground as though challenging him to try again. His chest rose and fell with a rhythm that felt too familiar, the sense of being tested, of being on the verge of failure that would echo louder than success. The morning stretched on with repeated attempts, each ending the same, the horse backing away, the ranger growing more agitated, Carter reminding him that patience was as much an act of strength as persistence. By midday, sweat dampened the ranger's shirt despite the cool air, and rope burns mar his hands. He threw the rope aside, voice rising with anger. "This is a waste of time. He doesn't want me near him, and maybe I don't blame him." Carter's voice sharpened for the first time. "Or maybe he sees the storm you carry and doesn't know if you'll strike him down with it. Calm yourself first, or he'll never calm to you." The ranger turned away, biting back the impulse to argue. He hated how easily Carter saw through him, hated that the man was right. He paced the perimeter, trying to steady his breathing. When he finally looked back, the horse was watching him with quiet intensity, head lowered slightly, as though curious. That evening, when Carter left for the cabin, the ranger remained by the fence. The sky burned with fading light, clouds streaked with crimson, and the air was thick with the smell of wet earth. He found himself speaking softly, words he had never shared aloud. "I know what it feels like. To be too much. To have people look at you like you're a danger, when all you ever wanted was to belong." The horse shifted, ears flicking forward, then stepped closer, hooves pressing into the damp soil. The ranger's pulse quickened. He held out his hand, trembling slightly. The giant lowered its head, nostrils brushing his fingers in a warm gust of breath. It was brief, fleeting, but enough to stir something long buried in him, a fragile thread of connection. The following days became a rhythm of trial and effort. He rose early, returned to the corral, and tried again. Some mornings the horse tolerated his presence, even allowed him to brush its coat or drape a rope gently across its back. Other days it resisted, pulling away with sudden bursts of power that left him in the dirt. Yet each setback carried less sting than before, for every failure was tempered by memory of that first fragile touch. Carter remained nearby, offering guidance in measured doses. He rarely gave commands, preferring to nudge the ranger toward discovery. One afternoon, as sunlight cut through clouds, Carter spoke of his past with quiet gravity. "I carried names with me. Too many. Men I couldn't save, battles I couldn't win. For years I thought their deaths were carved into me as proof of my weakness. But grief and guilt, they're weights you can't shoulder alone. They bury you if you try." The ranger said nothing, but his chest tightened with the memory of crushed bodies, of voices silenced beneath stone. He clenched the rope until his knuckles whitened, wishing for words he could not form. Carter's gaze lingered on him, knowing but patient, leaving silence to do its work. On the 5th day, the breakthrough unraveled. The ranger, too eager to test progress, swung into the saddle with hurried motion. The horse reared, panic flashing through its body, and bolted down the trail. Branches whipped past, wind tore at his face, the world became a blur of speed and danger. He clung desperately, but when the horse swerved, he was thrown, crashing into the dirt with a force that knocked the breath from his lungs. Pain flared across his side as he rolled to a stop. Rage erupted. He staggered to his feet, cursing the animal, cursing himself, voice raw with fury. "I knew this was useless. He'll never be tamed, and I'll never change. This was a fool's dream." He turned to leave, but Carter's shout froze him in place. "You walk now, and you'll walk for the rest of your life," the veteran roared. "Every time it gets hard, every time it hurts, you'll run. You'll run from this horse, from your ghosts, from yourself. Is that who you are?" The words struck like a blade. The ranger's fists clenched, his breath ragged. He wanted to deny it, to push back, but the truth was too sharp to ignore. He dropped to his knees in the dirt, shoulders heaving, fury dissolving into exhaustion. Carter said nothing more, simply watching, his silence a challenge stronger than any command. That night, the ranger returned to the corral, drawn by something he couldn't name. The moon bathed the valley in silver, the air cool and hushed. The horse stood quiet, head lowered, its body no longer tense. The ranger approached slowly, no rope, no saddle, no force. He stopped just before the fence, waiting. Minutes passed. Then the horse stepped forward, pressing its massive head gently against his shoulder. The weight was immense yet steady, grounding him in a way he hadn't felt in years. His eyes stung as he whispered, voice breaking, "Maybe we're both just trying to learn how to stand again." The horse did not move, did not resist, simply remained there, breathing with him. And in that quiet moment beneath the stars, the ranger felt something shift. Not victory, not triumph, but the fragile beginning of healing. For the first time in years, tomorrow did not feel like a punishment. It felt like a promise. The morning was crisp, the air carrying the scent of pine and damp soil as the ranger tightened the straps of his pack. Beside him, the veteran checked the rope coils and nodded with practiced efficiency. The giant horse stood tethered near the trailhead, its breath rising in steady plumes, the muscles along its shoulders shifting with restrained energy. Weeks of patience had built a fragile bond, and though the ranger still felt the tremor of doubt, he no longer questioned the animal's presence at his side. Carter had insisted on bringing the horse for this patrol, claiming the time had come to test trust where the stakes were real. The ranger agreed, though unease lingered in his chest. They followed a narrow path that wound along the mountainside, where jagged cliffs overlooked a ravine carved by centuries of rushing water. The ground was soft from recent rain, the trail slick in places. The ranger led, his eyes scanning the ridgeline for signs of erosion, his every step deliberate. The veteran followed with calm surety, his movements slower, but no less purposeful. The horse brought up the rear, hooves crunching against stone, its great head turning at each sound echoing through the canyon. For a time, silence stretched between them, filled only by the wind's whistle and the distant roar of the river below. Then Carter's voice broke through, low but steady. "You've changed." The ranger glanced back, brow furrowed. "How so?" "You walk lighter. You carry the same memories, the same scars, but they don't own you the way they did." Carter's gaze was sharp, measuring. That horse pulled something out of you, something you buried too deep for too long. The ranger looked away, throat tight. He wanted to deny it, but the truth sat heavy inside him. Before he could reply, the earth trembled beneath his boots. A dull crack echoed across the valley, followed by the sharp snap of rock giving way. "Move!" Carter barked. The trail shuddered as a section of earth collapsed beneath the ranger's feet. He lunged forward, but the ground crumbled faster than his stride. For a fleeting moment, he was weightless, then gravity seized him, dragging him down the jagged slope. His body struck stone, pain flaring white-hot across his ribs, and he slid into the ravine with a cry swallowed by the roar of the river. When he came to rest against a jut of rock, the world spun. Blood slicked his side where jagged edges had torn through his coat, and his leg throbbed with a sharp, unrelenting ache. Above, the sky looked impossibly distant, framed by walls of stone and earth. Panic clawed at his chest as he realized how deep he had fallen. He tried to move, but pain locked his body in place. Memories surged, his comrades' screams, the avalanche of rock, the helplessness as lives were crushed beyond reach. His breaths quickened, chest tightening with fear that history had repeated itself. This time, it would be his body left at the bottom of a ravine. Above, Carter's voice cut through the haze. "Hold on. We'll get you out." The veteran's figure appeared at the edge, small against the vast sky. The horse's silhouette loomed beside him, ears pricked forward, restless energy coursing through its frame. The ranger tried to answer, but his voice cracked. Don't risk it." "Risk is what living demands," Carter shot back, already moving with deliberate care down the slope. His hands gripped roots and rocks, his weathered body strained by the descent, but he pressed on. When he reached the ranger, sweat lined his brow, his breath harsh. He knelt, assessing injuries with practiced eyes. "Legs trapped," Carter muttered, voice grim. He tugged at the debris pinning the ranger, but his strength faltered against a weight of stone. After minutes of effort, he pulled back, chest heaving. "I can't do this alone." The ranger's eyes burned, fury mixing with despair. "Leave me. You can't." "Quiet," Carter snapped, steel lacing his tone. "You're not dying here, and I'm not burying another man in this cursed ground." He looked upward, then cupped his hands to his mouth. "Bring him down." The horse's ears flicked, its body tensing at the command. Carter scrambled back up the slope, his movements slower now, his breath ragged, but determination drove him. When he reached the top, he untied the rope from his pack and secured it around the horse's chest, murmuring steady reassurances. The giant stood still, eyes locked on the ravine as though it understood. The ranger watched from below, disbelief mingling with hope as Carter coaxed the horse closer to the edge. The veteran lowered the rope, letting it dangle toward him. With shaking hands, the ranger looped it around his torso, each movement agony. Carter shouted instructions, his voice carrying strength the ranger could not muster. Then the pull began. The rope went taut, cutting into his ribs. The horse strained, muscles bunching, hooves digging deep into earth. Its massive body shuddered with the effort, veins standing out along its neck. Carter braced the rope, urging the animal forward. The ranger's body dragged slowly upward, each scrape of stone a lance of pain, each inch a battle. He clenched his teeth, refusing to cry out, though tears burned his eyes. Halfway up, his grip faltered. The rope slipped, his body lurched, and for a heartbeat he dangled helplessly. Panic roared in his chest. But then the horse dug deeper, letting out a guttural cry that reverberated through the canyon. Carter's voice rang out, steady and fierce. "Hold on. He won't let you fall." The ranger forced his hands closed around the rope, knuckles white, blood-smearing fibers. The horse pulled again, each step a monumental effort, Carter guiding its movements with precision born of trust. Slowly, agonizingly, the distance closed. At last, strong hands seized his arm. Carter heaved, the horse gave one final surge, and the ranger collapsed onto solid ground. He lay gasping, mud cold against his face, the world spinning, but mercifully steady beneath him. For a long moment, none of them moved. Then the horse lowered its massive head, pressing its muzzle gently against the ranger's shoulder. The contact broke something inside him, a dam long held against grief and fear. He let out a sob, raw and unguarded, his body shaking. Carter crouched beside him, eyes glistening despite the hard lines of his face. "You're alive," the veteran murmured. Not because you carried yourself, but because you let someone else carry you. The ranger closed his eyes, the horse's breath warm against his cheek. For years, he had carried guilt like armor, convinced no one could shoulder it with him. Now, with Carter's steady hand and the horse's unyielding strength, he felt the weight shift, lightened not by erasure, but by shared burden. Night began to settle, stars pricking through the fading sky. Carter built a small fire, its glow soft against the darkness. The ranger sat close, leg bound, pain dulled by exhaustion, the horse resting nearby with quiet dignity. As flames crackled, he whispered into the stillness, not sure if the words were meant for Carter, the horse, or himself. "You didn't let me fall." His voice trembled, but his heart steadied with the truth. The veteran placed a hand on his shoulder, firm and reassuring. "Now you understand." The ranger stared into the fire, its light reflecting in his eyes. Something had changed in that ravine, something irreversible. He was no longer a man carrying death alone. He was a man who had been pulled back to life, and he knew the journey was far from over. The night stretched ahead, uncertain but no longer unbearable, for he would not face it alone. Dawn crept across the mountains, washing the world in pale gold. The ranger woke with the sharp ache of his wounds, every breath a reminder of the night before. Beside him, the fire had died down to glowing embers, and Carter sat sharpening a knife with calm precision, the sound rhythmic and steady. A few feet away, the giant horse grazed quietly, its powerful frame outlined by the rising sun. The sight stirred something deep within the ranger, a quiet awe mixed with gratitude he could scarcely put into words. He shifted to sit upright, wincing at the pull in his side. Carter glanced at him, eyes sharp but softened by relief. "You're tougher than you look," he said with a half-smile that didn't quite mask the depth of his concern. The ranger managed a faint chuckle, though it came out strained. "You didn't give me much choice." "No," Carter agreed, returning his gaze to the knife. "But you never had one anyway. You were always going to fight. The only difference now is you're not doing it alone." The words struck with quiet force. The ranger leaned back, letting them settle. For years, he had resisted companionship, holding people and creatures alike at a distance, as if isolation could shield him from loss. But the ravine had shattered that illusion. He had survived because Carter refused to abandon him, and because the horse, a creature he once doubted, had given every ounce of its strength to haul him back from death. As the sun rose higher, Carter packed their few supplies. "We need to move," he said. "Slow, careful. There's a ranger station not far down the trail. We'll make it by dusk if you don't collapse on me." The ranger smirked despite the pain. "You have such faith." Carter grunted, but his eyes gleamed with quiet pride. He helped the ranger to his feet, supporting most of his weight. The horse stepped forward as if sensing the struggle, lowering its massive body so the ranger could lean against its broad back. The warmth radiating from the animal was steady, grounding, like the heartbeat of the earth itself. Together, they began the slow trek back along the trail. The ranger's steps were shaky, his breaths ragged, but each time he faltered, Carter steadied him, and the horse adjusted its pace to match. The journey was grueling, every incline a mountain, every stone an obstacle, yet the companionship carried him farther than his strength alone could have. Hours passed. The silence between them was no longer heavy with unspoken grief, but filled with a strange, unbreakable bond. The ranger found himself remembering moments long buried, laughter with comrades around a campfire, the weight of trust shared in battle. Those memories no longer tore at him with guilt, but settled like embers, warm and bittersweet. At one point, Carter spoke, his tone softer than the mountain wind. "That horse, it's not just muscle. There's something else in him. You see it too, don't you?" The ranger nodded slowly. He thought of the way the animal had stood at the ravine's edge, unshaken by fear, and the way it pressed its muzzle to his shoulder, as if offering comfort. "He carries more than weight," he murmured. "He carries faith." Carter gave a slow smile. "Then maybe it's time you start doing the same." By late afternoon, clouds rolled over the peaks, and the air grew heavy with the threat of rain. The ranger's body begged for rest, but Carter urged him onward. "Almost there," he said, pointing to a faint outline in the distance, a small ranger station perched against a slope, smoke curling from its chimney. The sight brought a surge of relief, so powerful the ranger nearly wept. But the mountain was not finished testing them. As they neared a narrow pass, thunder rumbled and rain began to fall in sheets, turning the trail into slick, treacherous mud. Lightning split the sky, illuminating jagged cliffs. The horse snorted, ears flicking, but held steady, its massive hooves finding purchase where human boots slipped. A sudden rockslide thundered down the slope ahead, cutting off the path with a wall of debris. The sound echoed like cannon fire, shaking the ground beneath them. The ranger's heart raced as he stumbled back, nearly losing his footing. Carter steadied him, but his jaw tightened. "We'll have to go around," he said grimly. The detour forced them closer to the cliff's edge, where the ground was unstable, the drop sheer and merciless. The ranger's pulse hammered, memories of the ravine clawing back with each step. His breaths quickened, panic threatening to overtake him. He froze, staring at the abyss, unable to move. Carter's voice cut through, calm but firm. "Look at me. Not the drop. Me." The ranger forced his eyes up, meeting Carter's steady gaze. "You're not there anymore," Carter said. "That fall is behind you. This is now. And you're not alone." The horse pressed against the ranger's side, its bulk anchoring him, its quiet strength undeniable. He placed a trembling hand on its neck, feeling the steady pulse beneath the skin, and drew a breath that filled his lungs with something steadier than fear. Step by step, they crossed the narrow pass, the storm raging around them. By the time they reached solid ground, the ranger's legs shook with exhaustion, but his heart carried steadiness he had not known in years. When at last they stumbled into the station courtyard, drenched and battered, the storm broke behind them, leaving only fading rumbles and a clearing sky. A fellow ranger hurried from the cabin, eyes wide at the sight of them. "What happened?" he demanded, moving to support the injured man. The ranger opened his mouth to explain, but faltered, unsure how to put into words what had truly occurred. Carter stepped in, his voice steady. He fought the mountain and lived. Not by himself, but with a little help. His gaze flicked toward the horse, whose sides heaved with exhaustion, but whose eyes shone with unwavering calm. Inside the cabin, as the ranger's wounds were tended and warmth returned to his body, he found himself staring at the giant horse through the rain-streaked window. The animal stood quietly, steam rising from its back, its head bowed in quiet dignity. A surge of emotion rose in the ranger's chest, gratitude, respect, and something deeper he could not yet name. Later, when the cabin was quiet and Carter sat dozing in a chair, the ranger whispered into the flickering firelight. "You didn't just save me. You gave me back the part of myself I thought was lost." The horse shifted outside, as if hearing, and the ranger felt the truth settle in his bones. The ravine had not been the end. It had been the beginning of something larger, something unbreakable. He had been pulled from the depths not only of stone and shadow, but of his own despair. And now, with Carter's guidance and the horse's silent strength, he was ready to face whatever lay ahead. For the first time in years, he believed the path forward was not one of survival alone, but of purpose. The storm had tested him, the fall had nearly broken him, yet both had given him something greater than fear, trust, and the courage to keep walking. And as the fire crackled, warming the scars that still ached, the ranger knew this was not the end of the story. It was only the beginning of one worth telling. If this story touched your heart, please consider subscribing. I bring true, heartfelt stories every day.